Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of the Curator Series here on Gallery of Guitar, and a big welcome to Jamie Akers.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for dropping by. Jamie, as you can tell from that nice Scottish brogue, from the borders in Scotland but living in London, so we've got him up here in Scotland while he's giving some concerts in Edinburgh. In fact, he's on the road with a new recording which we'll talk a bit about today. A beautiful new recording of very interesting and quite rare guitar music. Rare just like the instrument that's sitting on the stand, which hopefully you have just come from listening to his beautiful performance here for the gallery, where he created two pieces for us. So Jamie, let's get straight to it. What were those two pieces that hopefully the audience have just heard?
Thank you. Yeah, the first piece was called Ukrainische Weise,
okay,
which is a German title. It's by a German composer called Johann Decker-Schenk. But however, he lived most of his life in St. Petersburg in Russia.
Wow.
And then at other times in his life was in Ukraine. He used to tour Ukraine every year. So while there, I guess he collected these Ukrainian melodies that he formed into this little fantasia. The title Weise, I'm reliably told, means way in German, but it's also an old German word for melody.
Oh, okay,
so that's sort of play on words.
The way of the melody, the melodic way, that's very beautiful. So a Ukrainian folk melody in an arrangement. So what sort of period are we talking with this composer?
We're talking mid to late 19th century. So he died in the late 1890s. So 1880s, 1870s, something like that. Beautiful.
It was a gorgeous melody. And then we went from there into French music, no?
Well, the title is French. It's by a composer called J.Klinger, who was also, he's born in Kherson, which is now in Ukraine, which in those days was part of the big mass of what was the Russian Empire at the time. And so, but of course, cultured people spoke French throughout the world. And I guess if you're trying to sell your music, you've got to market it. You can't have it. The thing I find with a lot of this music that I've been recording is from Eastern Europe. That a lot of titles, directions, instructions is all in Cyrillic. So luckily that piece has a title I can actually make sense of. I can just read the letters. So yeah, J.Klinger is a fascinating composer actually. Again, 1860s, 1870s. Writing for this kind of instrument, the extended range guitar that was very popular and prevalent in Eastern Europe throughout the mid to late 19th century into the 20th century. They're still playing them in the 1910s and 20s. I mean, famously, you know, Hermann Hauser, the luthier who built a guitar for Segovia.
Bream and Segovia both playing those guitars.
Bream and Segovia, and I think he has a son and a grandson.
Yeah, and a granddaughter maybe as well. I think there's a whole lineage now of Hauser makers.
The original guitars Hauser built were like this. So if you look at the catalogue of he originally built guitars in the Eastern European style after Stauffer, and then with the extended range is when he met Segovia. Segovia convinced him to start building the Spanish style guitars. Thereafter, the classical guitar became the Spanish style guitar. But prior to that, throughout the 19th century, there were various streams and avenues of classical guitar, offshoots, and
adding basses and
adding frets. So this goes up to the 21st fret. So it goes up to C sharp, and obviously it's got a bass range, so it goes down to a low A, so it goes down to fourth. Interestingly, the extra bass strings, I think perhaps a bit like on a modern 10-string guitar, they're not tuned down in regular intervals. They're just tuned down to whatever note you feel like.
And you're moving them around depending on the piece and the arrangement.
Exactly, the key. So it goes down to an A. So it has a range a fourth below the usual guitar. But if you compare, you've got that low A down there, the C sharp up here. You know, you've extended the range.
Yeah, you've got more of a harpsichord, pianoforte kind of range going on there as well.
Exactly.
I mean, it was nice. We really heard it in the Ukrainian melody you were using. You were really exploiting all of the low bass. I mean, it's a stunning instrument. The headstock is absolutely beautiful. So, I mean, we've got so many things to discuss, which is great. And also just the history of it. I mean, what was it we were thinking of you more as a collector of ancient music, maybe, you know? I mean, why have you got such a fascination with all this early or older music and also the instruments as well? What drew you to this?
That's an interesting question. I think I guess my training was in playing the lute. So I studied lute at the Royal College of Music, and so that was obviously, I think initially I began playing the lute I can't claim it was a particularly idealistic thing.
Okay.
It was just because I was studying guitar. I lived in Edinburgh and I was playing guitar, and my then teacher Rob McKillop, was a lutenist, a Scottish lutenist, and he was always encouraging me to play the lute. So eventually I relented and I said, all right, I'll give it a go. About a week after I said, okay, I'll have a go at playing the lute, I got a phone call from someone saying, can you come and play the lute in our Shakespeare play?
We need a lute player right now.
Exactly. I was like, okay, yes, absolutely. That never really happened when I played guitar.
No. There's so many people in the field, like, you know. Okay, so you're getting offered gigs pretty early on.
Exactly. Yeah. So then it just seemed like a reasonable avenue to explore. So then I ended up taking up lute and related instruments, early guitars and whatever.
Okay, so you were just in this family instrument, this relationship of like, okay, lute, other guitars, everything around the guitar, but something about that lute sound as well. Because I mean, you'll have just heard, you hear so much classical guitar music on gallery guitar, people playing what you talked about, that evolution through Hauser to that Spanish sort of style. But there's something very different about the tactile nature of the sound and the sort of, I think the whole instrument sounds, it's not just everything coming out of that soundboard or off that soundboard. I mean, even these kind of quasi F-hole kind of things here, not a normal sound hole, it's a different relationship with sound and feel, you know. So maybe your relationship with the instrument is, or it seems to me, a very tactile one. Like, you know, you're not playing on something like playing on a piano or playing on a modern day classical guitar. You have that relationship with the instrument. Well,
when you play old instruments, they do have a very primitive construction in some senses.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of evolution is taking place throughout the 20th century with technology, with X-rays, you know, acoustics, all kinds of things. You know, luthiers have explored different avenues. Whereas with old instruments, I think there's the element of the builder, the maker of the instrument is doing it in a very tactile way. They're doing it by feel. Yeah. You know, so I remember like reading the book about Torres guitars and how, you know, someone had X-rayed loads of them, and they said, oh, there's this signboard, and there were all these little weird differences. Yes. And why are there all these little weird differences? And it's just because sort of he felt his way around.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the older instruments have that quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, modern guitars, I think it's a bit of a trade-off, because modern guitars are much more reliable, they're much more efficient. You know, you can play a note and you know how it's going to sound from one day to the next.
There's a bit of a uniformity, I think, in the sound these days. I mean, that can sound like a bad word, I guess, in music, but actually it's very helpful for a lot of players.
Exactly.
You know?
No, I agree. It's brilliant. I think sometimes I envy that. I'm oh God, why can't these instruments just, if you've ever played the lute, it's just, you know, from 1 minute to the next, you've no idea what it's going to, you pick the thing up and like, right, what's going to happen now?
Yeah, it's a sort of complete surprise. And also, I mean, like, you know, it's like taking around the Hydra, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you've got weird cases for these things, weird shapes, it's definitely tricky, you know.
But as you say, there is a charm and a sense of that you can imbue, I don't want to say more personality, because that sounds, but you know, the instruments have a certain personality, and then when you work with them, you can bring out different qualities, different textures, different elements. I
think personality might be the right word, or developing your sound, developing your character because of that relationship you're building with the instrument. You know, I mean, I often think about piano players, they just have to deal with whatever is at the venue, whereas guitar players, we get very attached to the instrument because we carry it around with us. It comes on tour, it comes with us all the time. You're building a very personal relationship. I mean, it's a different thing, but I remember there's not a story about the Scottish snooker player Stephen Hendry, like he'd won all these world championships and then an airline broke his cue, and after the cue was broken, it took him a long time to re-find the form that he played with. And it's like, well, it's a stick, isn't it? So, you know, someone else can build him another stick, but actually everything about it, it's a psychological relationship as well. I think their instruments are really important to us, and when you look at something like this, it looks, well, it's like the third entity in our chat here. It's, you know, it's very quiet at the minute, but you know. Okay, yeah. So yeah, you've got a love for these interesting instruments, but so this one specifically, Tell us about where this came from, how you got hold of it. Where do you, I mean, you can't get one of these at Amazon or Tom and Music. Like, where do you get this?
Give it time.
Okay.
Give it time. After this album, everyone will want one. No, well, it's an interesting one. Obviously, this particular instrument, the shape is not a commonly found one. I mean, they were reasonably well made. Obviously, everyone thinks like, I know Les Paul invented the cutaway or something, but obviously it's got a double cut. I mean, a lot of these innovations have been around a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
So I bought this from a chap I know in Greece who'd found it somewhere. I didn't ask too many questions.
Okay, yeah.
Down round the back of the taverna, you know.
Great.
But yeah, he'd find it somewhere, and I was very interested in it because on my new album I recorded a piece by a guy called Viloteau, not a very well known composer, but interesting story. Can I backtrack?
Please backtrack, please.
Because Viloteau was kicking around in the late 19th century in obviously, you know, Russia, whatever, and Ukraine, and he's a friend of Decker-Schenk, who I played the piece by. Now, Viloteau wrote this piece, the Fantasia on Zaporizhzhia themes, so again based on Cossack themes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, the story is that Julian Bream's first teacher was a man called Boris Perot.
Yeah.
And there's a very early picture of Julian Bream, aged about 11, 12, playing a 9-string guitar. He's got a guitar with extra strings. Okay. Because this Boris Perot guy was part of this Russian, you know, Eastern European guitar scene earlier. Yeah. So anyway, this piece that I recorded by Viloteau was Boris Perot's showpiece. That's what he used to perform. Okay. So, I mean, although I'm talking about all these, you know, different traditions and things, it sort of comes together at certain key moments. Yeah, and I think at that moment when you've got Boris, this Perot guy, who obviously I think, you know, was not teaching Bream the modern classical guitar, but you know, he also encouraged him greatly and helped him out.
And obviously probably opened him up to a lot of repertoire and a lot of ways of playing and thinking about the instrument. Yeah. So
it's quite interesting. Viloteau, there's a picture of him on which I saw, and he looks very stiff and austere and kind of bearded Cossack type chap. But he's holding a guitar very much like this one.
It's so elegant. It's such an elegant looking instrument. I mean, when you first took it out of the case today, I thought it almost had an archtop jazz guitar kind of vibe to it for a moment when I was sort of looking at it. Okay, so wow. So you've seen that photograph, you've seen that history of Bream.
I recorded that particular piece on a different guitar, on a 9-string guitar, but then I saw this for sale and I was like, okay, so then I thought I better buy it because I needed it.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's in this photo.
I mean, what is the room in which you store your instruments like in London? I mean, how many are we talking now? Where have you got?
Well, you know, you say that, but I did offload a few quite recently. So I had a kind of collection of replica old guitars, like you know, fake ones. So I've sold all of those, and I only have original ones. Okay. So I got rid of about 5. So, but yeah, I've got maybe it's around about 20 instruments. So about 7 or 8 old guitars, lutes, the Arbo, Viola, oud, Cedar, you know.
Anything with strings you'll play it.
More or less, and a Les Paul.
Excellent. Yeah. So I mean, tomorrow when you go through to Edinburgh and you're going to St Cecilia's Hall, you're going to play quite a famous guitar as well in the concert. So tell us about the guitar you'll play tomorrow. I mean, obviously you're going to take that and play on this.
Play on that, yeah. Well, they don't have one of those in the museum.
Okay. See,
yeah,
so there you
go. Well, I'm going to play because my program that I'm going to play in St Cecilia's Hall tomorrow is a bit of an overview of everything I've done. So obviously I've been working recently on Eastern European music. Prior to that I recorded an album of 19th century women composers, and then before that I did the Scottish album, which was
nice.
like you know, 19th century guitar music inspired by Scotland.
So just Soar, kind of variations, Banks and Brays, and Giuliani too. I mean, these Scots melodies, like, you know, they permeated all the way through all these classical composers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Beethoven too, not for guitar, but he was setting it for
Haydn. They knew what they were about.
They knew the quality of the tunes. They did.
So this program tomorrow is a bit of an overview. So I'm going to play a couple of pieces from my women composers programme, and that includes music by Katerina Prattin.
Ah, lovely.
Now, one of the instruments in the collection in the museum is a guitar signed by Katerina Prattin. Now, wouldn't get too excited. She signed quite a lot of guitars.
Oh, right, okay.
So she had I think, she just approved them.
Yeah,
because she was quite a big name, quite a big figure in the guitar scene. So if she gave her approval to an instrument, then it was like a kind of guarantee. It was a decent instrument. I think she herself, her own actual guitar, there's an account of it being sold sometime in the 1930s. I think it was a sort of Lukasz or Romanticism or something. Yeah, it was quite a big name. But anyway, so I'm going to see if I can play some of my Katerina Prattin.
See how it sounds when you get it out of the museum.
See how it goes, and then I'll play some Mertz and some Giuliani, and then some of the Eastern European stuff.
Okay,
so it's a bit of an overview of my activities.
So tell us about the album then. So obviously it plays into some of the things that we've been talking about with the Eastern European guitar music, but what else is on it, and where did you record it, and tell us a little bit about where people can get it.
Yes.
That's important.
Well, yes. So the music on it is all a repertoire I dug up that is by Eastern European guitarist composers, right? So there's Bianco, Decker-Schenk. So they're all sort of floating around Ukraine, sort of that side of the western side of what was formerly Russia. It's quite hard to talk about this geographically because all these countries have changed names since then.
Of course.
So some Hungarian music, and I just I think it's a area of guitar music that's quite brutally neglected.
It is actually, and it was so charming when you were warming up earlier on, and I was sort of setting up some microphones and we were getting a sound, and I was saying this stuff is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the melodies are strong. There's really nice. They're really nicely harmonised and well set. And they explore the really expressive qualities of the instrument. And I mean, I thought it's quite diverse, even though there is, especially the second piece you played. Actually, what it does in terms of its modulations and its development, it's quite unexpected. You're sort of thinking, "Oh, I didn't see that coming at all." It's really beautiful music. So, I mean, brutally neglected. You might be right. Maybe we should be bringing this to the eyes and ears of more of the students.
Well, that's what I think. It would be nice to do. Obviously, I guess the idea that Spain is like I read a headline somewhere. It's like the deep Iberian origin roots of the classical guitar or something, and I was a bit like, there's actually it's a bit boring.
It's a wee bit. It's debatable.
Debatable. I mean, once you think, well, there must be loads of music by loads of composers, and you're like, Sor, Guad, Arcas.
And also writing often in a much more kind of Central European tradition at that style, trying to emulate Mozart, trying to emulate these other composers, not necessarily writing in that nationalistic identity that you would say Spanish, Then we play Albanian, and then we play,
transcriptions.
all this music Granados. It's nothing to do with the guitar. Sounds guitaristic, but it's not guitar music.
So interestingly, some of this Eastern European stuff, the composer J.Klinger, who wrote the second piece, he has excerpts in some of his music where he does these little balalaika impressions.
Okay.
And it is interesting, musicologically speaking, the earliest known representation of what a balalaika might have sounded like. Because there's no written music.
Oh, of course, yeah.
There's nobody wrote it down. So his little impressions of balalaikas, is like the source.
That's our first record
of what might have been played. So, I mean, I think what they do is there is this nationalistic element which gives it a nice kind of sound. Another big influence, I think, on these composers was gypsy music, which was hugely popular. Yeah. Which also, I think that's what links it a little bit with the Spanish stuff as well. Because obviously, having said he wanted to rescue the guitar from the noisy hands of the flamenco guitarists, Segovia then proceeds to commission lots of music that sounds a bit like flamenco.
I know. So slightly problematic quote, but he said it.
But you know what I mean. So anyway, not to diss Segovia in any way.
No, not at all. But
it's just he was a great self-mythologizer, I think.
Often, yeah.
But yeah.
But you were saying though the gypsy element, there's a lilt to it, I mean, if you didn't come straight from the curation, go after this chat and have a listen to Jamie playing, because there's not just that relationship, the physical relationship with the instruments and the quirkiness of the instruments we were talking about. There's a feel you know, and there's a lilt to it. There's a little kind of inégale or a sort of swing or something that's inherent in the way you're playing it, which does you know, for me it's not necessarily just a thing I would associate with Eastern Europe. I would say you get it in Scotland with a lot of our traditional music as well, you know, and sometimes that's lost. Sometimes you look at this kind of 19th century repertoire and think, okay, right, it's like a Mozartian kind of idea here, everything's going to like line up in a particular way. The way we heard you interacting with the music and the instrument has I don't mean improvised, but there's a spontaneity to the way you're sort of approaching it, which I think is really beautiful, you know. Thank you. Gorgeous playing, by the way.
What I think, I mean, something about them, don't want to sound like I'm down on anyone.
Down on, yeah, okay.
Down on
yeah, don't be down on anyone.
But I'm really grateful to be here. Did I say that? I think the modern classical guitar is a very hyper-articulated sound, right? Of course. People are really, you know, they're really, everything's very, very highly articulated, and that suits certain music. So, you know, for example, you can play the Bach suites forever, or certain, you know, Piazzolla. There's certain music that really suits that. But I think Romanticism doesn't have that strength of articulation. So when you talk about the lilt and the flow of the melody and everything, it's the fact that you don't articulate all of the notes of it. You know, you take the hierarchy of the note, and then you let that vagueness of, you know, the transition between the notes is a little bit vague. It's not always like there's the note. It's like there's
that, you know, that's interesting. There was a thing came up quite recently with the students when we were teaching at the conservatoire, and we were just having a performance class or a chat after a class, and one of the students said, you know, we'd had a very lucky to have a masterclass with David Russell about, you know, just last year at the conservatoire here in Glasgow, and he came and he spent some time with the students, and one of the students had played for him and was sitting like this, you know, so David would be there and he's playing, and he was like, it was amazing how much he was aware of the different levels of dynamic dependent on the importance of the note. Now it sounds like the most obvious thing anyone's ever said, but to your point about a modern day classical guitar having that articulated quality to every single note, almost like a piano, like every note's really audible, you start to sometimes not play a triad or play a chord with the level of weight that there should be dependent on what relationship the notes have to each other. And this student had said, look, when I was sitting next to David, I could really hear that he made notes disappear. They were hardly there, so that the melody was even more clear, or so that the bass was more clear. And it's that voicing that this kind of instrument you're kind of playing, the way you're approaching the music, that's what I hope people can really hear when you're listening to Jamie play, is that it's not just an A major chord. The C sharp is important in a different way to the A, to the E. You know, all these things are built up. And it's subtle, but it's also intent, playing with intent all the time. And that's when you're talking about this repertoire and these instruments and getting people to think about them, it's all about how we make music, like the intent of how we make music. So I think it's such an important point that you bring up. It's so important. Am I right in thinking, this is a class I think I had a long time ago, and I remember someone was talking to me about this hierarchy of all the different notes within the 19th century, that there's even ways of thinking about them with different meanings and different, like, is that?
It probably, I mean...
Or is that one of these other kind of almost post-Segovian, you know?
No, I mean, I think, I certainly remember from the Baroque era, people giving all kinds of, you know, giving things rhetorical functions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And likening particular melodic shapes to rhetorical devices. Things like, you know, like the ideas of Cicero, like repetition and all these different rhetorical practices. And applying and analysing music in that way. So I mean, but I think it all just comes down to communication.
So coming back to the instrument, I mean, scalloped frets, didn't expect to see that there at all. This could be, you know, an Yngwie Malmsteen number, like, you know, I mean, it looks like a gothic rock guitar when you get really close. The scalloped frets, what about the strings? Tell us a little bit about, you know, what you're doing there. I mean, playing on scalloped frets is very different to playing on your other romantic guitars, I'm sure, or lutes and things like that.
I mean, I guess this period they were experimenting a lot with, you know, all kinds of things. You often get romantic guitars which have a cambered neck, you know, rounded like a normals. They have that, some style for us. I guess the scalloped frets, it was very strange to play on at first, because when you push the string down, there's no wood, you're just air.
You're almost floating.
You're floating, so it's really touching the fret. But then you can do a lot with intonation. You can actually, get, when you hear the note, you can really press on it to make it go
sharp if you want it to get a little bit higher in the chord,
And for vibrato as well, you can get, it's a different, I guess the vibrato is a little bit smoother because it's not rubbing against anything.
It's a little bit more lyrical again, so even going closer to the voice,
So I guess that's why the scalloped frets. In terms of stringing, at the moment, I don't have anything fancy. I've got Aquila's romantic guitar strings on it.
Even for the basses as well?
The basses are lute strings. I had to get the right gauge for them, so I can guitar strings. So they're just some... like wound lute strings, Pyramid, they're called, this German company. And the trebles are just the Nile gut, romantic guitar ones. I haven't tried this one with gut strings yet. So
it's relatively new, isn't it? Like to you,
To me, I've not had it very long.
I mean, it's 120 odd years old, but to you it's new.
To me it's new. But once I have a bit of time, I'll probably try it with actual gut strings and see how that.
Do you spend your life, like with these lutes, sitars, ouds, romantic guitars, do you spend your life experimenting with this string works perfectly on this guitar? And what do you do?
Not really. I have two ways of doing it basically.
Okay.
So one is I use Aquila and Nile gut and bronze wound basses. Okay. That's my Savaras or Aquila.
Okay.
Or I use gut strings for the trebles, and then I use the Aquila basses.
And tell us about the gut strings. So, because for people that are nylon string classical players, why is he saying gut? What do you mean by that? So explain what's going on there.
Gut is sheep intestines. So
delicious.
Yes.
When you're talking to two Scotsmen here, one of whom is a vegetarian. I don't think you mind me saying that. So we eat haggis up in Scotland. Jamie doesn't, but
that's why they don't make gut strings in haggis.
That's it.
In Scotland. They're all in the haggis.
We have no time for guitar strings. We've got to have the haggis.
That's why nylon all the way. Yes, you take your sheep intestines. You take out the haggis. You dry it, you cut it into strips, and then you wrap it round itself till you get the right thickness of string. And this was all the rage until the 1940s, 1950s, really, when of course this nylon came in. And which I think originally was tennis rackets and stuff.
More consistent, I guess.
So as a synthetic material, it's
far
all
easier to produce.
Far cheaper, easier to produce. Obviously, gut is a finite resource because there's only so many sheep in the world, and you can't kill them until they've reproduced themselves. But gut obviously is an organic material, so it's very different. It responds very differently. It reacts to atmospheric pressures very differently. It can sound amazing. It can be really, really beautiful. Other times it can be very unreliable. It doesn't like humidity. It doesn't like if it's too dry, if it's too wet. So
in perfect conditions it can be ideal, but you also have to have a backup and a strategy. And
I think possibly if you're playing with nails as well, maybe the the nails might damage the gut as well, because it's a slightly different attack. Because like I say, it doesn't. It's quite a rough feel on the fingers. So that's what gut is. But of course, it was what was generally used well into the 20th century. So if you want to recreate what went on prior to that in some fashion, then one has to delve into the world of gut strings, I think. I'm not fanatical about it. I think it's just interesting to explore. As I know, you might try different
all the time, and it gauges tensions. Also things like very short nails, sometimes dependent on the repertoire. Like right now I have quite long nails, and I could feel them getting too long, so and you really bring them back. And of course, like, I think some people can be very militant about the no nails thing. I don't have the time for that or the energy for making a case. There's a natural way of things. Like, people enjoy playing with nails, and people enjoy not playing with nails. They enjoy both timbres. It's really good to explore, again, the tactile sort of feeling. For me, when I'm teaching, I like students to go with very short nails and learn to play with quite a lot of fingertip, just for control of sound, just for dampening the vibration inherent in the string after it's struck, so that the next note follows a legato kind of approach. So sometimes when you see the student come in after the summer and the thumbnail looks so big you could sort of dig your garden with it, or you would get knocked back on a plane, they'd be like, I can't bring that on, it's too sharp, you want to bring them right back. But I really like that feel. The no nail feel is really interesting that you're talking about, and we have that relationship here with the fretting hand, and it's quite interesting to start to get people to think about it with the plucking hand, because it also changes the action, and the way we use the joints and things like that, and so it's fascinating. Have you so you never use nail really at all?
Not
these days?
Really. I tell you, I've got my pinky nails a little bit long for doing artificial harmonics.
So for just bringing this harmonics
to bringing out harmonics. That's it. I don't play with nails. I don't have very strong nails is one thing, and one of the slightly. I guess it's like this with every instrument, but the physiological fact that you're gonna not make as good a sound as someone else just because your nails aren't as good.
One factor, yeah.
So
of course,
that was one thing, and then I'm just not used to the sound. And for a little while, I did try to grow some nails just to experiment with it. But what I found was I was forever adjusting my technique so the nails didn't touch the string.
Yes, you were going back. That thing I'm saying about really the short nail. Yeah. So
in the end, I thought, well, it's just not what I do. I'm, I'm not. There's no, historically speaking, there's plenty of evidence that people
didn't use nails.
Starr didn't use nails. There's like Piccinini back did. Weiss allegedly. Julius Leopold Weiss allegedly played with nails. Yeah. So,
well, again, it's down to the hand, I think, as well. Like everyone has a very different hand, a different. Some people have great quality of nails. They're just blessed, and their nails are solid. They're consistent. Some people. You think, oh, you've got the best A finger I've ever heard, but this index is terrible. So it's like they've got one great finger, one bad. I mean, it's again, it comes back to that. We have, as guitar players or collectors of weird instruments, Jamie, we have the ability still to put our hands on the music and hands on the instrument, and I think that is the special thing. So it's your relationship with it. And that's why we've got so much evolution through our plucked string journey. I think when you look back on it, it's great. Well, thank you so much for coming to the Gallery of Guitar, for spending some time with us. We're wishing you all the best for your concert tomorrow in Edinburgh. And if you haven't heard Jamie's performance already, get over to his beautiful performance and just have a good listen to a really quirky instrument. I've never had anything in the gallery like this. It's been a real privilege today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.